Welcome to the Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. I'm your host, George Roberts. Welcome back, entrepreneurs. Today we have John Dessauer, founder of the Dessauer Group and owner of over 1,500 units with his wife. He also manages over 2 million square feet of commercial real estate for others. Welcome, John.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tell us the origin story of your current enterprise, the Dessauer Group.
Yeah, so that was all of my companies that I own are interesting because they were never premeditated. It was just kind of one ran into the other. And with regard to the Dessauer Group, that's our education side. And what's interesting about that is when I thought about creating that, it was simply because I had people coming to me and saying, how did you do this? You know, when I started to build more and more of my real estate investing company and investing more, I had, all these people coming to me, how are you doing that? How'd you make that acquisition? How'd you analyze that property? Or more importantly, how did you get the equity out of that property to go buy more? And so I thought this is a really good way that I could convey to them what I did and create an education company to help more and more people. So that's really where that came from.
That's awesome. And you can find that coaching, I believe, at the DessauerGroup.com, correct?
Absolutely. The DessauerGroup.com. Absolutely. And my last name is spelled D like David, E, 2 S's like Sam, A-U-E-R. Sometimes that's the hardest thing is pronunciation, which you did well. Pronouncing and spelling my last name. But if that's our worst or our toughest challenge, we're going to be okay.
Exactly. So if you can find it, you'll definitely find some great coaching out there. And I know I've been following you on YouTube and looking at your podcast. So definitely somebody that I see as a thought leader and as a mentor. So definitely something worth checking out, the DessauerGroup.com. And you've amassed quite a personal portfolio with your wife. Tell us about what are your methods? How are you doing things differently than other people?
Yeah, so there's a lot of way to acquire real estate. And one of the things that I realized early on is no matter where you start, you're going to have the potential to run out of capital. So I took it upon myself to always think about where that next capital is coming from. And what I've always done is, frog in my throat today, is been able to buy something correctly, buy an asset correctly. And one of the ways that I do that is to drive, make sure I have room to drive the value of that asset. So in driving the value of that asset, by doing specific things, you can actually create the equity that is going into the next deal. So that's really what I focused on and have been focusing on my whole career.
So then early on to grow faster, were you using other people's money or was this literally your focus from the get-go?
So my original capital came from a home equity line of credit that I had. So I never really used other people's money. Like 98% of my purchases have all come from pulling that new equity out from my last project or last few projects to get into the next deal. If you buy correctly in multifamily and you manage correctly in multifamily, you can create and increase the equity in those assets. And that really provides the seed money for your next deal. So that's really, again, what I focused on my whole career.
Love it. And so that home equity line of credit, that's a great way to go. You pay a little bit more than if you were going to do a cash out, but you can use as little or as much as you need. You can literally draw on it like a credit card, only with much better rates. So I think that's...
You know what, George, by the way, I never focused on the cost of money. I mean, really, overall, I've not focused on that. That's where one of the mistakes that I think beginning investors make is they focus on the cost of things where we need to flip our mind and focus on the return of things. So I didn't focus on the cost, I focused on the return. And one of the things that stops most people from moving forward is, oh, that interest rate is too high, or, the points are too high. I focused on, hey, what can I do with that to create a massive return for my portfolio and my family? And that made all the difference in the world.
Well, I really love that, because if you are buying right and managing right, you should have a pretty huge spread between today's rates and what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think especially today when interest rates are low, but when you're borrowing on the commercial side, you can actually, run into some higher rates. Well, if it's your only option, again, focus on the return. Don't focus on the higher rates, because you're going to need that money to get you going.
Absolutely. And again, I'd love to underscore when people are doing things differently, and that's way cool. This is an industry that tends to focus on using other people's money, and you've shown how you can do that, which with what must have been, at least relatively speaking, a very small amount of capital, and turn that into 1,500 units. Another thing that I like to focus on is people that work well with their spouse. And I'm working on bringing my wife on board. She's interested, but has her hands very full at the time with 2 boys, teenagers. So tell us about getting your wife on board. How did that work? Whose idea was it to get into this, and how did you move the ball down the field?
Well, it was my idea to get into this. My wife was very, very skeptical. For those of you that are listening and you have a skeptical spouse, one of the ways that I got around that was, I had talked to my wife's grandfather, and, I said, gosh, Heather is so skeptical on things and trying new things. Did you have to deal with this with Heather's mother or Heather's grandmother? And one of the tips that he gave me was, stop telling your spouse what they're going to be doing. Like, stop telling them, hey, we're going to get into multifamily unit investing, and start asking for help. The same mechanism that keeps someone skeptical is in the same family of something as a mechanism that makes people want to help other people. And so, don't know why I'm so froggy today. And so in changing that perspective and going to my wife and asking for help on investing and help in building a business, that made all the difference in the world. So she came in, she was less skeptical. And the interesting thing about that is today she runs our whole investing portfolio. So she took the same energy it took to be skeptical, she focused in a different way, and that's where the magic happened.
Well, I love it. I see some of the same aspects in my own relationship and business relationship with my wife. I have been telling her what I want to do and how we ought to do it. And I also, without even really thinking about it, I said, hey, I need some help with the meetup. She comes out there, and she's just great, because now I've got my partner, I've got my wife as well. And we've got at least 3 people who can start those conversations throughout the table. So next up, I want to have her come on the podcast. And she was our first interviewer, by the way. She interviewed me for issue number 1. I'm going to have her do a quick commercial, because need to make sure that I'm actually driving people to the website and getting the maximum impact here. So I love it. Great advice there. So don't just tell your spouse, hey, I want you to do this, or that I want us to do this. Say, hey, I need your help. Love it. Love it. And you've got other business lines of business as well. So you're managing over 2 million square feet for others. So tell us about that enterprise, how you got that set up, and what you've done to build the economies of scale to manage that large of a portfolio.
Yeah, so I appreciate the question. That company is called Anton Agency or Anton Asset Management. And so with that, we're a full service brokerage. We operate in Illinois, Indiana, and Florida. And we manage properties for others through that entity, Anton Asset Management. And in managing those assets, we use the same strategies that we use for our own portfolio in, really trying to take over management of that and drive the value asset on commercial real estate so that we can create equity for our owners, so they can go out and use that new equity to go buy more cash flowing assets. We have a full service marketing company, which is called Foundery Marketing. If you go to tellawildstory.com, you'll see that company. The Anton one, by the way, is antonagency.com. You can see what we do there. And then finally, we do commercial lending. So if you go to oppenheimercap.com, you'll see the lending arm that we do funding for everybody from mom and pop fix and flips to, 400, 500 unit apartment buildings to commercial applications. We're funding a factory in California, $9 million. We're funding, apartment building construction. So different things like that.
Yeah, I love it. You're a true serial entrepreneur, and maybe it'd be great to go into some entrepreneurial questions.
Sure.
So who was your greatest influence as an entrepreneur? Was it somebody close to you, like a family member, or were you maybe a first generation entrepreneur that was learning from someone further away?
Yeah, so my parents came here from Germany, and so something unique happened in my childhood where my father passed when I was 4. So my mom was left with, 3 boys, 1 girl, and due to some unforeseen or unfortunate circumstances, unfortunate, let me clarify that, circumstances, my mom had lost all of the life insurance money that my father had passed. So interestingly enough, in South Chicago, I grew up in apartment buildings my whole childhood. So I got to see that business from the inside looking out. And the other thing that's interesting is my first mentor was the apartment owner that we lived in. So I saw my mom go to her 9 to 9 every day, but I saw the apartment owner, his name was Harry. Ironically, I don't have any hair, but his name was Harry. And I saw him come to the apartment once a month to collect that rent check. And I saw him go to all of the other units to collect that rent check. And that really stuck with me. All these people were going to their 9 to 5s or 9 to 9s. And all they were doing was working to give this guy a check. And so that's where I really first thought about doing this as an adult to support my family and build a legacy for, my children, my children's children, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I love that. That's an amazing story, just to come from the inside out and recognize what a great business it is. I love that. I just love that story. So then talk about your inspiration. Your inspiration as an entrepreneur. What keeps you going? Why do you love this lifestyle? Now, I think I don't believe you worked at a W-2 for very long. I believe very shortly you had a job working for someone else. So tell us how that was and why entrepreneurship is what really lights your fire.
Well, I worked in the corporate world for several years, but it was kind of like one of those things. After I graduated from college, I got out into the corporate world, and I was shocked, George. I was shocked at, is this it? Everything that everyone's ever told me, is this it? This is what you guys are talking about? And so I've never really been a person that is kind of geared or suited for the corporate world, middle management, upper management. And so I left that and I started to invest in real estate. And it's been a journey of 25, between 20 and 25 years now that I've done it. It was the best decision I ever made. Scary at first, because you don't have that guarantee of those checks coming in. So you really have to have resolve. You really have to you have to be, what's the best word? Hold on. Okay, that helped me. Obsessed. You have to be obsessed. If you're not obsessed with this, or really anything, you shouldn't do it. Obsession is the thing that will propel most people to their goals more than anything else. And if you can be obsessed about family real estate investing, making money, building a business, chances are you're going to succeed.
I love it. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people who maybe feel like they haven't really found themselves in the corporate world, who may even be middle management or vice presidents someplace, and realizing, hey, is this all there is? Being able to execute on your own vision. That's really amazing for some people. So what keeps you going? Is it just, I'm sure at this point it's not a dollar figure. Who inspires you, or what inspires you? I think you mentioned leaving a legacy.
Yeah, I mean, my son is a big part of that. He's 7. I have 3 kids, 29, 27, and 7. Think about that for a little bit. But my son inspires me because he is, every day I get to spend with him. It's like me spending with my father. I know it sounds kind of weird, but my father passed when I was 4. So it's kind of like a payback for me. If I didn't have the passive income coming in, I wouldn't be able to, have the freedom of time to be able to not only spend with him, but the rest of my family. So that's really been my motivation. That's been the fuel that, enables me to go work out, or, buy another building, or so I have the health and I have the time to be able to hang out with my family and my wife, and and really do good things in that sense.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And you really do have to see the health is rolled in there. It's too easy to let ambition destroy your health. And I feel I get a whole lot more done because I go out and I'll jog for an hour whenever the Michigan weather permits. That's getting a little harder. I'm on the treadmill these days.
Yeah.
Well, for our listeners then, how about some books that have helped to forge you as a leader and an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So the last 3 books that I've read, I got to think, I'm an avid reader. The last 3 books that I've read was You Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, Living with a Seal by Jesse Itzler. It's a book about him and David Goggins. What was the book that I read before that? I read Verbal Judo. That's a really good book if you're interested in sales. The book I'm reading right now is Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. It's a book that is recommended by more billionaires than anything else, but it's unbelievable how the Mongols took over Asia and Europe and really conquered a lot of things. But in the conquering of a lot of things, they really made what we know as the modern world today. That led into the Renaissance. I'm about 80% done with that book, but fantastic stuff. So I'd recommend reading to all of your listeners. It's a great way to kind of take your mind out of the negativity of the world today and put your mind in a positive sense moving forward, and how you can use that in your own daily life.
I love it. Those are some amazing people. I feel like so many in the entrepreneurial world are inspired by David Goggins. Just love that guy. I remember his story in a nutshell was that he was afraid to fire a gun. So what does he do? He ends up becoming, I believe he's a Marine. Is that right?
And he's a Navy SEAL.
Navy SEAL, my mistake.
He's
okay.
He did the Army, passed the Army Ranger certification.
And how did that happen? He listed in both branches?
He was in all 3 branches. Well, not all 3, but there's 5 branches. 6 now with Space Force, I guess. He was in Army, Navy, and Air Force.
Okay. Wow. Something I didn't know, but I just love it. If there's something you're afraid to do, just jump right into it. And yeah, exactly. Becoming a Navy SEAL from being a guy who's afraid of firearms. That's just an amazing story. I mean, if he can do that, I just think when I look at life, what's your excuse?
He lost 100 pounds in 2 months to get into the Navy SEALs.
Wow.
100 pounds in 2 months. He was at 290. He went down to 190 to be able to qualify to get into Navy SEALs. Yeah,
well, I just love that guy. And he has another anecdote I just love from him. I think he wrote a book unpublished called What the Heck is Wrong with David Goggins. I think I'm cleaning the language up a little bit, but wow, being able to be honest with yourself. Yeah, what a great guy. Super, super amazing. And Genghis Khan, another great pick, literally changed the history of the world from Europe through China. I mean, even today, I think the way that they're set up, Yeah, the way that they nomads, and I'm telling the story just in the worst way, were able to come by a lot of lessons for business. That's not particularly a business book, is it? Or are they relating what he did to business?
Well, I think there's a lot of metaphors in there that
Yeah,
definitely relates to business. So, from Genghis Khan all the way down to his grandson, Kublai Khan,
yeah.
and that journey of 3 generations was just fantastic. A lot of metaphors for business, a lot of metaphors for life, for sure.
Yeah, well, one I'd pull out just off the cuff would be that if you're small and entrepreneurial, right? I mean, they were able to conquer societies because they were just literally always on the move. They didn't really need to take anything with them, but what fit on the back of their horse, and they were very dangerous for a few generations.
Yeah, the biggest lesson, or one of the biggest lessons for me out of that book was, what is the mission? You can travel light. You don't need a lot of equipment. You can conquer armies 3 times as big as you if everybody is on the same page with mission. And if you don't have your mission defined, and everybody that's on your team, if they don't know what the mission is, chances are they're not going to be as effective. So that was a big lesson for me in reading that book.
I love it. So speaking of lessons, talk to us about learning from failure.
Yeah. So, I failed a lot in my career. A lot of people don't like to talk about that, but, in failing a lot, the majority, I don't know what the exact stat is, but the majority of people move on. They leave, they go away because they don't want to face that failure again. And so that happened to me. If that's happened to your listeners, or maybe even you, George, I know what you're feeling, or I know how the listeners are feeling, because that happened with me a lot. And so when I started to get into real estate investing, I realized that the chances, if you want to do big things, the chances of failing are high. And so I said, I can either use that to my advantage, or I can use that to my disadvantage. And I decided to use it as an advantage, meaning you can back into that failure and understand exactly what went wrong with it. And that becomes the blueprint for your next deal, or that becomes the blueprint for your next 3 years down the road. So, if somebody asked me, John, who would you rather talk to? Somebody that's ultra successful or somebody that fails all the time? I probably want to talk to the guy that fails all the time, because that, I think you can do a lot more with knowing not what to do than knowing what to do, because the market changes so much. Knowing not what to do will set a platform for you to make really good decisions. And if you can make good decisions in real estate investing, chances are you're going to be able to build a good portfolio. A lot of times, man, it might be from the turkey, George, it might be from the turkey. But a lot of times when people talk about their successes, the success wasn't necessarily brought about by the actions of that individual. It was brought about by maybe the rest of your team that has learned from their failures. So again, I would encourage everybody to embrace failure, embrace losses. And if you can do that, a lot of the time, you can do some amazing things.
Absolutely. I feel very strongly that if you're not experiencing failure, you're just not stretching yourself as a person. You're not setting your goals high enough, right? You should always have, I think, some sense of a fail or a miss in what you're doing if you're truly challenging yourself.
Sorry about that. I had someone come in. Can you?
Oh, yeah, perfect. So we are recording this, of course, the day after Thanksgiving. So I think that there's probably a lot of lethargy out in the world. I know I'm feeling the day after Thanksgiving.
For sure.
How about sharing your market insights? Where do you think the market is headed in multifamily real estate, or maybe in commercial real estate in a more general way?
Well, I think the market right now, both on the residential side and commercial side, are robust. I think that, with the amount of money that's in the marketplace and the enthusiasm to buy real estate today, I don't know how long that can continue to last unless we are in an environment of low interest rates and more money into the environment. I look for, this inflationary scenario to be a challenge for a lot of people, or it can be a learning lesson as well. And so I think that the Fed will come in and maybe adjust rates to handle that or tackle that. And when that happens, and there is an if on that too, if that happens, I think it'll slow down the real estate investing market, significantly. I hope that doesn't happen, but what I do know about markets is they never go like this. They're always fluctuating. And a good real estate investor is going to make money on the upside, and they're also going to make money on the downside.
I love that. And yeah, speaking of markets and fluctuations, a lot of people just look at national statistics. That's a good place to start. You're not going to see a lot of the fluctuation there. You've got to remember that all real estate is local. Look at your local market. Look how it weathered the last recession. Consider how the next recession may be similar or different from that last recession. And I know you counsel your students not to pay too much attention to the cost of money, but we may now be in an environment where that puts a pressure on cap rates. Obviously, if the next, it doesn't impact your NOI, right? But we have to remember, though, that your rational investor is going to look at, hey, what am I going to expect to get out of this in terms of cash flow? And we simply can't expect cap rates to stay where they're at if interest rates have to go a couple percent up or more.
Yeah, so cap rates have been compressing for a long time. The cap rate market is one that, I watch all the time. If interest rates start to rise, those cap rates are going to be moving north. So they'll be getting higher, which means that the valuation on those multifamily unit properties will be going down. They won't be as expensive as they are today. Personally, I think that's a good thing. I think we need that. A little bit of inflation is good for the rental market. You're seeing that today in with what's going on with rents and asking rents. But too much inflation is where the consumer, i.e. the renters, run into a ceiling where they can't afford that rent anymore. I think we're getting there in some markets. So I expect that to change in 2022. I do expect the interest rate market to change. You're already seeing that on the residential side. So look for that to affect pricing in 2022 and beyond.
Yeah, I love a lot of the elements you're bringing out. Many moving parts here. So one, of course, is it's the cap rates, it's the inflation. You have to look at the risk premia. We have to look at also where rents are headed. And one of the things you might want to do is, look and see, assuming that we don't have a whole lot of wage inflation, which we may not, and which I believe is going to tend to, in most cases, lag inflation that we're seeing elsewhere in the environment, right? Hey, shopkeeper can raise their rates overnight. In our business, we can raise the rent each month, but how often do you get a raise? Hey, maybe once a year if you're lucky, and when times are tough, maybe not even so often. So a lot of things to look at. You might want to see how much more could your tenants pay if we don't see that wage inflation. But yeah, definitely some frightening times to be in real estate, but probably I would say the best place to be. I don't know of a better asset to be. I'm not going to put everything in gold. What about you, John?
I look at it as I love this time. I think it's in times of change where people make the most money. So whether it's markets where the cap rate is going up and the valuation of those buildings are going down, someone's going to be affected by that. The best investors are problem solvers. So if we can provide solutions to that market and have the ability to have the ability to solve those problems for those investors or for those property owners, that is where the money is going to be made. That is where, truly this becomes an ability for somebody to come into this market as an investor, as an entrepreneur, and make a lot of money, or have that potential, to make a lot of money. That's not guaranteed, of course, but that's kind of what I look at. That's what I'm looking for, is this market to change in a way where there's more problems in the marketplace, where I can be a solution provider.
Yeah, I love it. You got to be agile, be nimble, just like Genghis Khan and his armies.
Right.
Well, I think that we're going to have to wind it up. Couple more questions that I really do want to ask you is to tell us the story of your favorite acquisition.
My favorite acquisition was probably my first one. It was a duplex, and the interesting thing about that is I bought it from a woman. She was in her 70s. She was a twin, and they had bought the building because she had their husbands passed away. Now, the interesting thing about that is the twin sisters were married to twin brothers. That kind of blew my mind, George. I'm like, do all these kids look the same? And so when the husbands passed away, one twin lived above, one twin lived below. One of the twins passed. So the kids were putting the other twin into an assisted living facility. Well, I came in and bought that property, and I was got 80% bank financing and 20% seller financing. So I was 100% financed. That was really my first lesson, because I was over leveraged. Excuse me. And being over leveraged is not a fun position. I'm starting to see a lot of that today, where investment owners are over leveraged. They have too much debt to support the property. And so that was my first lesson. That was the reason why it's, my favorite acquisition, because I learned so much on that first purchase. And that enabled me to go on from there. And, 1,500 units later, I still use that lesson today.
I love it. Sage advice. It's not about the money you're making now. It's about how you're going to weather that next recession. It's not about becoming rich. It's about staying rich. Reading about the Vanderbilts last night, and I think there's multiple versions of this quote. And it's an amazing family, because Cornelius Vanderbilt went from rather, I believe, humble beginnings to the richest man in America. His son, richest man in the world. 5 generations later, not a single millionaire Vanderbilt. But I believe he might have been the one who said, any fool can make a fortune. It takes a whole lot more to hang on to it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, even in this Genghis Khan book that I'm reading, the 3rd generation, there was no more family lineage after that, because Kublai Khan, even though they created a lot of stuff and built a lot of stuff, they didn't last past that. So 3 generations, I think that's interesting. You see that over and over with wealthy families in enterprise. So knock on wood, that's not going to happen over here. So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Building a legacy, something I think that we all think about. It's really hard. The true inheritance for your children, of course, is the values you give them. And hopefully all of us who have built wealth will be able to pass that on so that they'll have enough to balance and hopefully not go out and buy a whole bunch of Lambos. Yeah. As they say, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, or maybe you could say from the steppy to the steppy in 3 generations. Right. Anyway, we'll see. I don't know if that quote's going to take off, but how about this? One final question, if you don't mind. Can you send us out with a heartwarming story from your entrepreneurial journey?
Well, I think our ability to, do things on a passive income not only provides us with time, but it provides us with opportunities to help others. So, every year during this time, the Thanksgiving time, my wife has a mission that she tries to feed as many people and families as she can. So that number is, she feeds over 150 families. And we're able to do that, number one, because of the blessings that we have in place. But number two, this has gone from more things that not just Thanksgiving, because I think a lot of people do that during the holidays, but it's the ability to give throughout the year, spend time with people, give financially where you can, or at least give some knowledge away. And so this has been a mission of my family, not only during the Thanksgiving holidays, but really throughout the year. So my wife does that. I focus a lot with the country of Haiti. I sit on a board of directors where we've built approaching 25 sustainable villages throughout the country of Haiti. And so whatever it is that you decide to do, whatever that mission is, make sure you can give yourself, the financial resources and time to be able to give back. And if you can do that, I think you're going to be in a better, well-rounded position as an entrepreneur.
That's beautiful. And I know that many people who do have the entrepreneurial mindset, they just love to give back. That I think it's really an abundance mindset that leads both to generosity to others, and at the same time helps you find opportunities for yourself. John, I want to thank you for a very heartwarming interview. Thanks for coming on the Foundry.
It was awesome. Thank you for having me.